Hello, friends. If you're excited to dive into the story of Schindler's List, released in 1993, in English, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join a community that loves exploring the best movies. Let's get started. In the shadow of one of the darkest chapters in human history, there emerges a story that does something truly rare. It shows humanity not just as a witness, but as a force of resistance, resilience, and redemption. What begins as a tale of self-interest slowly transforms into one of the most remarkable narratives of courage ever told on screen. And the man at the center? Complex, flawed, and unforgettable. At its heart, this is a story about choices, those we make when no one is watching, those that come with a cost, and those that ripple out far beyond our lifetimes. It's based on real events, a true story adapted from Thomas Keneally's novel Schindler's Ark, and captured in stark, stunning black and white cinematography by a director at the peak of his storytelling power. The film unfolds against the backdrop of Nazi-occupied Poland during World War II, where cruelty and compassion collide in ways that challenge the limits of what it means to be human. From the very first frame, the tone is haunting yet intimate. A candle flickers and burns out. Silence. The world we're about to enter is one that demands our attention and our emotional investment. This isn't just about war or history. It's about the individual lives caught in its devastating sweep. It's about the power of one man to say no when the world around him screamed yes to evil. We meet our central figure as he steps into a Nazi party gathering, sharply dressed, charming, ambitious. A German industrialist with a taste for wealth, influence, and power. He's not someone you'd expect to become a hero. In fact, at first, his motivations are entirely self-serving. He wants to make money, and he sees an opportunity. With war raging and Jewish workers available for cheap labor, he opens a factory to produce enamelware for the German military. On the surface, it's business. Just business. But something happens. As the story progresses, we begin to see a shift. A subtle one at first. He watches. He listens. He sees the fear in the eyes of those he employs. He hears the screams echoing through the streets as families are torn apart. He witnesses unthinkable cruelty, and where others look away, he cannot. What began as a factory for profit becomes a sanctuary. And the man who once measured success in gold and vodka starts counting lives instead. Among the people working alongside him is a quiet, brilliant Jewish accountant. A man whose calm presence contrasts sharply with the chaos around them. Together, they begin to forge a list. Not just any list. A list of names. A list that becomes life. For every name on it, a promise, protection, survival, hope. The plot moves with a relentless sense of urgency, yet it takes its time to build emotional depth. We witness scenes of unbearable horror, yes, but also moments of startling tenderness. A child hiding in a pit, a woman clutching her dignity, a hand reaching out in silence. Every detail, every shot carries weight. And yet, it's not just the man at the center who commands our focus. One of the film's most chilling presences is a Nazi commandant whose cruelty is both casual and calculated. He shoots without hesitation, abuses without remorse, and carries out genocide with terrifying indifference. He is the embodiment of power unchecked, drunk on authority, devoid of empathy. In contrast, the industrialist, once a man of similar privilege, begins to unravel in the face of conscience. This stark duality between them becomes one of the story's most powerful contrasts. The setting itself feels like a character. Gray skies, crumbling buildings, railway tracks leading to nowhere but horror. And amidst it all, a single flash of color. The red coat of a little girl walking through the madness, unnoticed, untouched, until she isn't. That single image becomes a turning point. A crack in the armor, a visual scream. From that moment on, the man who once toasted to his success now weeps for every life he cannot save. As the war reaches its brutal climax, the stakes grow higher. The factory, once a tool of war, now becomes a haven. Bribes are paid. Lies are told. Names are changed. Each action more desperate than the last. He puts everything on the line, his fortune, his status, his safety. And still, it is not enough. He carries the weight of the ones he couldn't save like a chain around his neck. But there are victories, quiet ones, a wedding held in secret, a child born in defiance, workers gathered in a room reading a letter, signed by every soul he rescued, declaring him not just an employer, but a savior. The power of these small moments is overwhelming. They aren't grand or cinematic in the traditional sense, but they matter. They are real. And in that reality, they become unforgettable. Perhaps what makes this story so compelling is not just what happens, but how it happens. The narrative doesn't rely on melodrama. It doesn't preach. It observes. It reveals. And in doing so, it forces us to confront questions we might rather avoid. What would we have done? How far would we go to help someone else? Are we capable of such courage or such cruelty? The performances are nothing short of extraordinary. The lead actor brings a layered complexity to the role. At once confident and lost, powerful and broken, the man he portrays is not a saint. He drinks too much. He bends the rules. He profits from war. And yet, by the end, he is transformed into something much more than a man. He becomes a symbol of what it means to fight for humanity when humanity is all but gone. Even the supporting cast leaves an indelible mark. From the calm wisdom of the accountant to the haunting silence of the workers who survive under impossible conditions, every character feels like a real person, because they were. Their stories, their names, their faces, etched forever into history, now brought to life on screen. As the narrative draws to its conclusion, there's a moment of unbearable emotion. A ring is given made from gold teeth. An inscription inside, "Whoever saves one life saves the world entire." It's not just a line. It's the thesis of the entire journey. And when the central figure breaks down, we break down with him. Not because of what he lost, but because of what he found. Purpose, redemption, and the painful knowledge that even the greatest acts of kindness can't erase the weight of history. The final scenes shift from black and white to color. Real survivors, real descendants, a legacy that lives on. Stones are placed on a grave, a gesture of respect, of memory. The camera lingers, silent now, letting the image speak for itself. This is not a story of triumph in the traditional sense. It is not clean. It is not easy, but it is necessary, because it reminds us that even in a time of unimaginable darkness, a single light can make all the difference. A man who began as a profiteer ends as a protector. A list once made for numbers becomes a testament to names, to souls, to lives saved not by strength, but by compassion. And perhaps that's the greatest twist of all. The idea that heroism can come not from those with swords or guns, but from those who choose to stand up when it's easier to sit down. From those who see suffering and say, "Not on my watch." It begins not with chaos, but with ceremony. A flickering candle. Hebrew prayers fill the silence. There's a strange stillness in the room, a kind of reverence before the storm. Then, as the candlelight fades, the world shifts into black and white, and we are taken straight into the heart of Nazi-occupied Poland. The streets are buzzing with activity, not of joy, but of fear. Jews are being registered, tagged, herded into cramped quarters in Krakow. Chaos simmers beneath the surface, but for one man, opportunity is rising. He enters like a man born for the moment. Dressed in a sleek black coat, he strides into a Nazi party event as though he owns the place. Confident, calculating, he is a businessman with an eye for power, someone who knows how to read a room, and more importantly, how to manipulate it. With a few handshakes, a toast, and a well-placed gift, he begins weaving himself into the ranks of the regime, not as a soldier but as a supplier, a factory owner, an ally of convenience. At the same time, the Jewish community is being forcibly moved into a cramped, newly designated ghetto. Families are torn from their homes, wealth confiscated, rights erased overnight. And yet, within this rising oppression, a system begins to form. Jobs are assigned, labor camps open, and that's where the paths begin to intersect. The businessman sees his chance. He has no interest in ideology, only profit. War, for him, is a marketplace. He decides to open a factory, enamelware for the German military. It's lucrative. All he needs is cheap labor and the right connections. With help from a shady former officer and access to the Jewish labor pool, he gets both. To run the day-to-day operations, he finds someone quite unlike himself. A quiet, intelligent man with deep eyes and a reserved nature. An accountant, a Jew, someone who knows how to keep things balanced when the world is falling apart. Together, they begin hiring workers. Not for humanitarian reasons, at least not yet, but because it's efficient. The list starts small. Just names. Men and women with skills. But behind each one is a family, a life, a story. Meanwhile, the ghetto walls close tighter. Children beg on corners. Mothers barter their last valuables for bread. Soldiers patrol with rifles and expressions that never change. What was once a city has become a prison. And then, a new presence arrives. A commandant. Tall, cold, terrifyingly casual. He doesn't just follow orders, he enjoys them. This man doesn't see people, he sees numbers, statistics, targets. He moves into a villa overlooking the ghetto, his windows perfectly framing the suffering below. He watches it all like a game, his game. Soon, construction begins on a massive labor camp on the outskirts of the city. Prisoners are forced to build their own cages, brick by brutal brick. There's a scene where the accountant is almost sent away, almost killed in a paperwork mix-up. It's the first real glimpse that even the smallest error in this system can mean death. But the businessman steps in, insists he's essential. And he is more than either of them knows at the time. Back at the factory, work continues. The businessman grows richer. He entertains Nazi officials, brings them gifts, wines them, dines them, charms them. He knows their weaknesses and plays them like instruments. But something subtle has started to shift. He begins to notice his workers, not just as laborers, but as people. He sees their faces, hears their stories. A young boy hiding his mother under machinery. A woman silently praying over her hands before starting work. Every day, their lives hang by a thread, and somehow that begins to matter. And then comes the liquidation. With little warning, the ghetto is ordered to be cleared. Soldiers flood the streets. Screams ring out. People hide under floorboards, in sewers, inside walls. But hiding rarely works. Doors are kicked in. Families are dragged out. Anyone resisting is shot on sight. The commandant oversees it all from a hill, binoculars in hand. The businessman watches too, not from safety but from the streets, in disbelief. In the midst of this chaos, one moment stands apart. A little girl in a red coat, the only color in an otherwise black and white world, wanders through the carnage. Her innocence is jarring. She moves alone, unbothered, a silent witness to the horror unfolding around her. We follow her through the streets, past bodies, past brutality, past madness, until we don't. Later, the man who watched her sees the red coat again, this time crumpled, lifeless. And something inside him changes. After the liquidation, the remaining Jews are sent to the labor camp, a cold, sterile place built with their own hands. The commandant now rules with total control, and he exercises that control with terrifying unpredictability. He shoots from his balcony for sport. He beats men with the butt of his rifle. He chooses who lives and who dies on whims, and those whims are deadly. Yet, amidst the fear, the businessman makes a bold move. He requests that his workers be transferred from the main camp to his own factory, separate, secure, under his authority. He claims it's about productivity. But the truth runs deeper. These people, once numbers in his ledger, have become something more. Getting them transferred isn't easy. Bribes are paid. Paperwork manipulated. Bureaucracy twisted. But slowly they come, one by one. And within the walls of that factory, something impossible begins to happen. They survive. Work resumes, but it's different now. He begins to use his position not to exploit the system but to outweed it. He fabricates job descriptions to keep people off transport lists. He instructs guards not to punish workers for mistakes. He insists on regular meals, warmth, decency. Still, the danger never disappears. The commandant grows suspicious. He visits the factory, inspects the workers, questions the leniency. There's a scene where he stares at the businessman with cold, assessing eyes, trying to figure him out. But the charm holds for now. The accountant remains his quiet ally, keeping the books, handling the logistics, and sometimes, with only a glance or a pause, reminding him why they're doing this. Meanwhile, the world continues to burn. Trains leave daily for places no one returns from. Families are separated with ruthless efficiency. Children disappear overnight. Hope is a rare and fragile thing, and yet, it clings to the corners of the story like a candle in the dark. And there are moments, fleeting, heartbreaking, that show just how close death always is. A child pretending to be a brick. A woman told she'll be relocated, only to vanish. A man too weak to lift a load, beaten until he doesn't move again. Still, the factory remains a haven. As long as a name is on the list, there's a chance. That simple truth becomes everything. More names, more bribes, more risk. The list grows, and with every name added, the stakes rise. There's a particularly haunting scene in the commandant's home. He stares into a mirror, shirtless, practicing a speech on mercy. Power, he says, is when we have every justification to kill and we don't. For a moment, you think he might actually understand, that he might change. But then, just as quickly, he snaps back. The illusion is shattered, and someone dies again. At the factory, the man in charge begins spending more. His fortune dwindles, not because he's losing business, but because he's buying lives. Every name has a price, and he's willing to pay it. Still, it's not enough. More deportations are ordered. The camp is thinning. Whispers of extermination echo through the barracks. Gas chambers, crematoriums. The end is coming, and everyone knows it. There's no safety anymore. Not in the factory, not in the camps, not even in silence. And yet, the work continues. The machines spin. The workers move in practiced rhythm. There's a kind of dignity in their labor now, a shared understanding that survival itself is an act of rebellion. They are alive, and every day they remain so is a victory. But something darker looms on the horizon. The war is turning. The Allies advance. Panic begins to spread through the ranks of the oppressors. Orders grow more frantic. Cover-ups begin. Witnesses disappear. Evidence is burned. The system that once felt unstoppable is cracking. And with it, a new window opens. And at the center of it all remains the list, no longer just a record of employees, but a lifeline. Every name a miracle. Every signature a defiance. Behind closed doors, the accountant and the businessman work late into the night, arguing over names, pleading for time. Each addition means another soul pulled back from the brink. And yet, even as some are saved, others are lost. As the war nears its end, the pressure mounts on every side. The world outside the factory is collapsing into chaos. The Germans are retreating. The Soviet army is advancing. And in the midst of this crumbling empire, decisions are being made, cold, calculated, and final. The so-called final solution is reaching its most desperate and brutal phase. The labor camp grows quieter, not with peace, but with erasure. Files disappear. Prisoners are moved or executed without a trace. What began as brutal efficiency now becomes pure desperation. The commandant, once a man who indulged in cruelty for amusement, now scrambles to protect his own skin. The war that once made him a king is turning him into a fugitive. But there's still one man who refuses to let this story end in blood. He begins planning something unthinkable. If the workers are in danger where they are, then they must be moved. All of them, away from the death camps, away from the commandant, away from a system that is consuming itself from within. But to do that, he needs permission. He needs paperwork. He needs money. And most of all, he needs a list. Late into the night, names are written. Hundreds of them. Carefully, deliberately. Each one is a life chosen over profit, over comfort, over neutrality. This list isn't just names on a page. It is a declaration that even now, surrounded by destruction, one man can still choose to save instead of destroy. The transfer is approved, barely. The workers are loaded onto trains, separated by gender, men in one, women and children in another. It's all meant to be safe, controlled. But nothing in this world follows plan. The men arrive at the new factory site, cold, remote, but safe. They begin to rebuild what little sense of stability they had. But the train carrying the women and children is diverted. Not to the same town, not even to the same region. It goes somewhere else entirely. Auschwitz. The name itself feels like a death sentence. For days, the women are trapped in the heart of the killing machine. Naked, shaved, shoved through inspections. They witness horrors that defy description. One scene lingers with devastating intensity. Rows of women packed into a shower room, unsure if water or gas will come from the pipes above them. Seconds stretch into eternity. Screams choke in silence. Then water. Relief floods the room, followed by weeping. Not for safety, but for the randomness of survival. The man who arranged their transfer is furious. He storms through Nazi offices, demands their release, takes money, bags of diamonds, bribes, bargaining, but eventually, miraculously, they are returned. When the women arrive at the new factory, emaciated and trembling, they're welcomed not as workers, but as survivors of an escape few ever make. Work resumes in the new factory, but things are different. Nothing is sold. Nothing is shipped. The machines spin, but the parts they produce are deliberately defective. This is no longer a factory for war, it's a front, a cover for life. And still, the cost grows. With each passing week, more bribes must be paid. Food must be smuggled in. Guards must be kept silent. Officials must be satisfied. His fortune, once a towering monument to ambition, vanishes piece by piece, traded for time, for safety, for names. The workers know what he's doing. They feel it. In the warmth of the building, in the full portions of soup, in the absence of violence. They begin to see this man not just as a boss, but as a protector, one who risks everything while pretending not to. There are moments of quiet strength scattered throughout this chapter. A young boy hiding in the shadows of the factory, eyes wide but hopeful. A rabbi who blesses each new day as if it's a miracle. A mother who teaches her daughter to write letters in the dirt, just in case they both survive to read them. But outside those walls, the world continues to unravel. The commandant, once drunk on his own authority, is now paranoid and unstable. He knows the war is lost. He knows the Allies are coming. He starts burning evidence, documents, buildings, even corpses. He tries to erase everything he built, everything he did. But some things refuse to be erased. There's a meeting, tense, hushed, between the commandant and the man he once tried to read like a book. One begs, one reasons. It's not about morality. It's about leverage. The factory owner knows how to speak their language. He doesn't preach, he bargains. And in that bargain, lives are preserved. And then, finally, the war ends. Word reaches the factory before the soldiers do. The Germans are retreating. The Nazi machine has collapsed. There's no one left to give orders. No one to obey. Just silence. The workers gather in the yard, unsure what to do, what to believe. And then he speaks. He tells them they are free. The guards are told to leave. The gates are opened. No one cheers. There's only the sound of breath, of feet shifting in place. After years of fear, freedom feels foreign. But it's real. And then comes the moment that tears through even the strongest defenses. Standing among the people he saved, he breaks down. For the first time, the weight becomes too much to carry. I could have got more, he says. He looks at his car, his ring, his watch. Each item becomes a haunting calculation. This is gold. 2 people, at least one. I could have got one more. The pain pours out of him, not just grief, but guilt. In saving so many, he feels crushed by the ones he couldn't. But he doesn't fall alone. The accountant steps forward. The workers surround him. They offer him a gift. A simple gold ring, forged from the fillings of their teeth. Inside, an inscription. Whoever saves one life saves the world entire. It's not a reward. It's a testimony. As dawn breaks, the workers leave. They walk across fields, uncertain of where to go, but certain of one thing. They are alive. And they carry with them more than memories. They carry hope. The man who saved them vanishes into history, hunted by the very people he once served. He disappears not with fanfare, but with humility. His factory stands empty now. The machines are silent, but the names remain. And then color. The black and white fades, and we see not actors, not characters, but real people. Survivors. The descendants of those whose names once lived only on a list. They walk across the screen, solemn and proud. They place stones on a grave, a Jewish tradition of remembrance. Not just for the man buried there, but for what he chose to do. There's a quiet end. No music swells. No final speech. Just people living proof of what courage looks like. And when the screen fades to black, it doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like a beginning. A call to remember. A plea to choose differently. To choose humanity, even when everything around us says otherwise. This isn't just a story about war. It's not even just a story about survival. It's about the power of a single person to stand against the tide. To say no, to say not them, and then to act. Thank you for joining us in this journey. If this story moved you, please like this video and share it with others. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more powerful stories that deserve to be heard, remembered, and honored. Some films are made for entertainment. Some are made for box office glory. And then there are those rare few that seem less like movies and more like a calling born not just from imagination, but from something deeper. That's how this one came to be. And while the story told on screen is powerful enough, the story behind the making of it is equally strange, unsettling, and unforgettable. It all started with hesitation. The director, one of the most successful storytellers in Hollywood, refused the project for years. Despite being approached multiple times, he felt unworthy, emotionally unequipped, too young, too American, too far removed from the rawness of the Holocaust. It wasn't until a decade after he first encountered the story that he finally said yes. Not because he was ready, but because he realized he might never be. But even then, something strange happened. He didn't take a salary, not a dime. He considered it blood money. Uncomfortable with the idea of profiting from a story rooted in genocide. All proceeds from his role as director were donated to establish a foundation dedicated to Holocaust education and testimony. From the very start, this wasn't about Hollywood. It was about history. When production began, it did so under a heavy sky, literally and figuratively. The cast and crew arrived in Krakow, Poland, where many of the real events took place. They weren't on a studio set. They were walking streets that had once been lined with bodies. Filming took place in real locations, some just blocks from where the atrocities had occurred. You could feel it in the air. Ghosts didn't have to be summoned. They were already there. And then there was the decision that shaped everything. Black and white. Not for style. Not to be different. It was a return to truth. Old newsreels. Survivor footage. Historical documents. They were all monochrome. That visual language, stark and cold, became the soul of the film. But there was more to it than just history. The lack of color stripped away distractions. It focused the eye. And it did something else, something unspoken. It made the bloodless violence even more violent. The silence even louder. But within that black and white world came a single act of rebellion. One spot of color. A little girl in a red coat, wandering through chaos. Her presence wasn't just a symbol. It was based on something real. A moment recalled by survivors who remembered seeing a child that stood out in the middle of the massacre. That tiny splash of red wasn't just visual poetry. It was memory, preserved in celluloid. Filming wasn't just difficult, it was emotionally brutal. There were cast members who had to walk off set just to breathe. One of the actresses, after filming a particularly horrific scene, went back to her hotel room and cried for hours. Some of the extras, Holocaust survivors themselves, reenacted their own traumas. One man returned to the very place he had been imprisoned decades earlier, now playing a prisoner once more. He reportedly collapsed on set. One night, something eerie happened. An actor, still in his Nazi uniform, went to a hotel bar after filming. He hadn't changed. The patrons, locals, fell silent. A woman burst into tears and fled. She had survived the war, and the sight of that uniform in her hometown again was too much. Even though it was a costume, it had brought the past roaring back in a heartbeat. But perhaps the most unexplainable story came not from a scene, but from a moment between takes. There's a tale told by crew members. One day, during a break, a man approached the director. He was older, soft-spoken, and had been watching the filming from the edges. He introduced himself simply. No drama, no emotion. Then he pointed to a spot nearby and said, "That's where my family was killed." And then he walked away. No one had seen him arrive. No one knew who he was. But his presence lingered long after. As filming continued, the toll deepened. The director, despite his success and reputation, began to unravel emotionally. He stopped watching daily footage. He couldn't sit in the editing bay. At night, he'd call friends, weeping. One of them, a fellow filmmaker and friend, began receiving near-daily phone calls just to talk him through the process. The weight of what he was capturing was too much for one person to carry alone. Even the crew felt it. Many of them refused to return to certain locations after shooting there once. There was a particular scene, mass executions in the snow, that left some of the camera team physically ill. Not because of what was happening technically, but because of what was happening emotionally. The scene was staged, yes, but it felt real. Too real. And that was the point. But out of the darkness came strange moments of light. The director, known for his work in science fiction and adventure, was also working on another film at the same time. A film about dinosaurs. While one was being filmed in Poland, the other was being edited in the US. Some nights, after filming harrowing scenes, he would return to his room and review dino footage just to escape the horror for a few minutes. It was an odd duality, one man living between genocide and Jurassic Park. The contrasts didn't end there. During filming, a Catholic priest was brought to set. Not for advice or consultation, but to offer emotional support. He would hold mass for crew members, but also be available for anyone who needed to talk. On a production like this, therapy didn't come in the form of scripts and cameras. It came through silent conversations and shared grief. There were odd interruptions as well. During one emotional scene being filmed in a concentration camp replica, a group of neo-Nazis marched nearby, shouting anti-Semitic slogans. Word reached the set. Some actors wept. Others grew furious. Filming was halted for the day, not because of production problems, but because reality had once again bled into fiction in the worst way imaginable. One of the lead actors, known for intense method performances, found the role eating away at him. Playing a character whose cruelty knew no bounds, he reportedly stayed in character between takes. But at night, he'd retreat to his hotel, ashamed of what he was embodying. He later admitted that even pretending to be that kind of man left scars. One night, filming paused for a different reason. The entire crew gathered to watch a survivor meet the actor who had portrayed the man who had saved their life. They didn't speak at first. They just looked at each other. One, a ghost of the past. The other, an echo made flesh. And then, quietly, they embraced. No one on set spoke for several minutes after. Even casting was eerie at times. Extras were often actual Holocaust survivors, or their children and grandchildren. Some of them had never spoken of their experiences until filming began. One woman, while in costume as a prisoner, stared at herself in the mirror for nearly an hour before breaking down. The sight of herself, aged and in uniform, had made her feel as though she'd stepped back in time. There was even a moment involving the list itself. The original document, the one with the names that changed history, was located and used as reference during filming. At one point, it was placed on set for a close-up. No one was allowed to touch it without gloves. Even in a fictionalized version, the list was treated with sacred reverence. Crew members said it felt less like paper and more like scripture. As post-production began, something strange happened. People stopped talking about awards or box office. The studio grew quiet. Marketing was subtle, almost reluctant. No flashy premieres. No hype. Just screenings. Word spread quietly, from person to person, the way sacred things always do. And then came the final scene. The decision to end with real survivors walking alongside the actors who portrayed them wasn't planned from the beginning. Came late in the process after much thought. The scene was simple, people walking, placing stones on a grave. No dialogue, just presence. But the power of that moment. Real hands, real faces. Pierced deeper than any words could. When the film was finally released, audiences didn't cheer when the credits rolled. They didn't even clap. In many theaters, they sat in silence. Some cried. Some stared. In one reported screening, no one left their seats for nearly 10 minutes. The ushers waited quietly. No one said a word. And yet, out of that silence, something profound emerged. Schools began using it as curriculum. Survivors came forward to share stories. People who had never heard of the man at the center of the story suddenly knew his name, knew what he did, and knew why it mattered. There's a strange footnote to all of this. Despite everything, the director said it was the most important work he'd ever done, but the one he could never do again. It broke him in ways no one saw. And even decades later, when asked about it, he still speaks of it not as an achievement, but as a responsibility. Because sometimes, the strangest facts are the ones that aren't strange at all. They're human. They're painful. They're necessary. It unfolds in a world stripped of color, where the absence of hue doesn't just evoke the past. It mourns it. From the first frames, the film immerses us in a hauntingly real environment, not as a distant recollection, but as a visceral memory. The cobblestones, barbed wire, and decaying walls don't serve as simple backdrops. They breathe history, holding within them the echo of every footstep and whisper of those who once lived, feared, and fought within them. The story's foundation is built on setting real, scarred, and unflinching. The choice to film on location in Krakow, Poland was more than an aesthetic decision. It was an act of testimony. The Kazimierz district, which once housed a vibrant Jewish community, was used to reconstruct the Krakow ghetto. Its narrow streets, unrenovated facades, and cracked stones offered a raw authenticity. As characters moved through these corridors, it wasn't performance. It was reanimation. It was a resurrection of lives lost and a neighborhood silenced. Many of the film's most devastating moments were filmed in and around Soroka Street, Josepha Street, and actual apartment buildings from the era. The buildings weren't dressed up. They were stripped down. Wallpaper peeled away to expose concrete sorrow. Windows broken not by design but by time. Every frame held its own weight. In the ghetto liquidation scene, for example, the camera navigates cramped stairwells and chaotic courtyards, mimicking the panic and disorientation of its characters. It doesn't just show us horror, it traps us in it. The labor camp scenes were filmed in a quarry just outside Krakow, where the production team reconstructed the Plazo camp. This space, empty and forgotten, was transformed with chilling detail. Barracks were rebuilt based on Nazi blueprints. Watchtowers rose against the sky, casting long shadows over gravel and mud. The decision to recreate the camp in an area devoid of modern infrastructure gave it a timeless, desolate quality. It's a place where time feels frozen, where even the wind sounds like it's holding its breath. Inside the reconstructed factory, every bolt and beam was positioned to feel authentic. The enamelware machines, many still functional, filled the space with a grinding, metallic rhythm. It was mechanical music, underscoring a transformation not only of steel but of souls. As the workers file through its gates, day after day, the factory becomes more than a setting. It becomes a paradox, a prison and a haven, a place of exploitation that becomes ultimately one of survival. The settings were meticulously selected not just for historical fidelity, but to evoke a particular psychological state. The interiors were often shot in tight, claustrophobic frames. Rooms felt airless, crowded. Lighting was sparse, natural, often filtered through windows or the glow of candles. There is a noticeable absence of flourish. No Hollywood gloss, just shadow, grain, and texture. It's this visual simplicity that gives the film its spiritual weight. It feels like watching a confession unfold. The cinematography, by Janusz Kaminski, is deliberate and stark. Nearly all of it is in black and white, not to mimic old newsreels, but to separate the film from the present, to create a space where time is suspended. That absence of color becomes thematic. Black and white forces focus. It erases distraction. There are no blue skies or green fields to comfort. There is only light and darkness, survival and death. And in that grayscale world, the single use of color, the girl in the red coat, strikes like a scream in silence. The girl appears in the chaos of the ghetto's liquidation. Amid the smoke and gunfire, she wanders, alone, unnoticed. Her red coat, muted, almost rust-colored, draws the eye and refuses to let go. It becomes an anchor in the sea of brutality, a marker of innocence. When she appears again, silent in a heap of corpses, that coat is no longer a symbol of life. It is the final word on what has been lost. That moment, filmed without music, without dialogue, holds more power than 100 speeches. Handheld camera work dominates the film. Kaminski and Spielberg avoided artificial motion, relying instead on fluid, reactive shots that move as if another person is present. A ghost trailing the characters. The camera shakes in fear, hesitates at thresholds, follows with urgency. It's never fully detached. It's a witness haunted like the viewer. Symbolism permeates every setting. The train yards where deportations begin are shot in wide, sterile frames. No music, just the clang of metal and the cries of children. Suitcases are stacked like bricks, forming grotesque walls. Eyeglasses, watches, and shoes become relics of personalities erased. The camera lingers on these objects, not for spectacle but to remind. These were people. Each item a fragment of identity. Each shot a eulogy. Inside Auschwitz, the camera remains restrained. Spielberg didn't shoot inside the actual gas chambers, a decision made out of respect. Instead, he stages a scene just outside, replicating it on a nearby set. Women arrive, are stripped, herded into a room. The lights dim. There is silence. Then water. A moment of temporary relief in a film that rarely offers it. The power here lies not in showing death, but in how it plays with expectation, how it forces us to feel what cannot be filmed. Terror, relief, guilt. Even the soundscape adds to the oppressive mood. Footsteps echo in hallways. Distant gunfire interrupts conversations. There is almost no non-diegetic sound in the first half. The world is allowed to speak for itself, cold, mechanical, and cruel. When music does appear, it's often within the world. A girl singing softly, a violin played in secret, or the haunting main theme by John Williams, performed with aching restraint by Itzhak Perlman. The absence of sentimentality becomes its own aesthetic. Nothing is exaggerated. Nothing underscored with sweeping orchestration or heavy-handed narration. The emotion is born from silence, from space, from stillness. In one of the most affecting scenes, bodies are exhumed and burned. No speeches, no mourning, just fire, and ashes carried away by the wind. Parallel editing furthers the film's visual grammar. Celebration is juxtaposed with brutality. A Nazi party unfolds in elegance, while workers are executed outside. A wedding among prisoners contrasts with the commandant's erratic rage. These contrasts do not dilute each other, they sharpen. They ask, how can joy exist amid this? The answer the film offers, because joy is resistance, and horror does not wait for an invitation. The framing of Schindler himself evolves through setting and lens. Early on, he is shot in wide angles from behind, through glass or mirrors, detached, aloof, performative. As his conscience awakens, so does the camera's intimacy with him. We see his hands tremble, his eyes lower. In his final scene, where he breaks down in front of his workers, the factory space becomes sacred. Wide, empty, echoing. He stands alone, dwarfed by his failure to do more. The space accuses and forgives. In the final moments, the film transitions from fiction to reality. The actors and real survivors walk together to Schindler's grave. It is the only scene in full color since the prologue. The shift is not jarring, it is earned. The color here represents not life, but continuity, legacy. The world did not end. These people endured, and they remember. It begins not with spectacle, but with silence. A muted, monochrome world that slowly unfolds its grief. The setting isn't a backdrop. It is the film's breath and pulse. Every location chosen, every angle composed, works in concert to immerse the viewer not just in a time or place, but in a state of memory. Aching, unrelenting, intimate. The story opens in Krakow, Poland, and the city becomes more than a place on a map. It transforms into a living museum of war. The film was shot on location in and around Krakow, in streets that had seen the history firsthand. These weren't just props or backlit recreations. These were the real bones of a city that had suffered, endured, and remembered. The Kazimierz district, historically the Jewish quarter, was used to recreate the Krakow ghetto. Its winding streets and aged buildings gave the camera something tangible to absorb, walls that whispered, stones that remembered every footstep. The liquidation of the ghetto, one of the most harrowing sequences in the film, plays out in this very neighborhood. The camera tracks through courtyards and apartments, never cutting away from the chaos. The tight, handheld shots make it feel as though the viewer is trapped there too, running, hiding, witnessing. There's no room to breathe. The narrow alleys choke the screen, much like they choked those who once lived there. Schindler's residence, filmed in an actual apartment on Strzeleckiego Street, stands in quiet contrast to the squalor and despair just a few blocks away. His elegant lifestyle, his spacious rooms and formal dinners, are all framed in wide shots that feel detached from the suffering outside. That visual distance, the space, the quiet, the polish, serves as a stark reminder of privilege amid horror. Then there's the transformation of a quarry outside Krakow into the Plazo labor camp. It was constructed with chilling accuracy, using Nazi blueprints to build the barracks, the fences, the roads. Everything down to the tombstone-paved pathways was recreated. The camera doesn't dramatize the camp. It presents it. The long shots of the watchtowers, the emptiness of the yards, the haunting repetition of uniforms and rifles, all work together to drain the color from your imagination. Even though the film is in black and white, you feel the bleakness in full color. The camp isn't just a location. It's the embodiment of dehumanization. It looms over the characters, suffocates the screen. Inside the enamelware factory, we find yet another transformation. The setting evolves as the narrative does. What begins as a place of exploitation slowly turns into a sanctuary. The factory becomes a contradiction, a space where people are worked, yet where they are saved. The machines clank rhythmically, the workers move in near silence, and every inch of the factory floor is used to show not just labor, but quiet defiance. It becomes holy ground, in a way, a flawed sanctuary where life continues, if barely. And then there is the cinematography, Janusz Kaminski's stark, ghostly work that makes the film feel more like a memory than a movie. Shot almost entirely in black and white, the decision wasn't just aesthetic. It was thematic. The absence of color mirrors the loss of innocence, the stripping away of humanity. It forces the audience to focus on light, shadow, and expression. There are no visual distractions. Faces are pale, eyes are dark, and the world is reduced to what is essential. Morality is rendered in black and white, with no comforting grays in between. But even in this absence of color, there are moments of devastating contrast. Most unforgettable is the appearance of a single red coat on a little girl during the ghetto liquidation. There's a splash of color in a world without it. She wanders through the chaos, unnoticed, unprotected. That coat becomes a symbol of innocence, of what is lost, of what will soon be gone. And when we see it again, in a cart of corpses, there are no words. Just the red, dulled but unmistakable. The film doesn't explain it. It doesn't have to. The visual style goes beyond black and white. The film uses handheld camera work in the most chaotic scenes. Deportations, executions, the frantic disarray of survival. These movements aren't smooth. They shake, they blur, they duck. The camera becomes a participant, not an observer. In quieter moments, the shots become more composed, often framed with symmetry or stark contrast, reflecting control, power, or resignation. Lighting plays a crucial role, especially in interiors. Natural light filters through windows, creating stark silhouettes and dramatic contrasts. Faces are often half-lit, emphasizing duality, hope and despair, guilt and resolve. Night scenes are especially powerful, with darkness swallowing corners and uncertainty lingering in every shadow. Firelight, candlelight, moonlight, they all suggest a world barely clinging to illumination. Set design supports this visual tone. In the ghetto, homes are cramped, filled with objects but devoid of comfort. In the labor camp, everything is stripped down to function, bunks, walls, gravel. There's no room for individuality, no warmth. Even Schindler's environments reflect his internal state. His office, once immaculate and ordered, becomes darker and more cluttered as his priorities shift. By the end, it mirrors his disarray and awakening. The sound design complements the visuals with unsettling precision. Gunfire echoes like punctuation. Orders shouted by officers bounce off cold walls. There's very little musical score in many scenes, allowing the natural sounds of footsteps, machinery, and breath to dominate. When music is used, such as the haunting violin melodies, it doesn't lead the emotion. It follows it. The main theme, performed on solo violin, feels like a lament, a voice crying from the past. There are recurring visual motifs that deepen the film's emotional resonance. Trains appear again and again, a symbol of transition, of displacement, of death. Shoes are shown being sorted, piled, discarded, silent markers of lives erased. Piles of belongings, suitcases, glasses, letters, become stand-ins for the people who can no longer speak for themselves. One particularly powerful sequence involves the burning of exhumed corpses. There's no sweeping score, no dramatic narration. Just fire, smoke, and silence. The camera doesn't look away. It watches. It grieves. It demands that we do the same. The film also uses framing to speak volumes. Jewish characters are often boxed into frames within frames, doorways, windows, fences, reinforcing their entrapment. By contrast, Nazi officers are framed in open spaces, often from lower angles, emphasizing control. But over time, that framing changes. Power dynamics shift. The camera begins to follow victims more closely, more intimately, while distancing itself from perpetrators. One of the film's most emotional moments is set not in Krakow or Plazow, but in the mind. In the final scenes, the narrative shifts to color. Survivors walk in silence to place stones on Schindler's grave. These stones, a Jewish tradition of respect, form a chorus without words. Each one a story, each one a life saved. The color here doesn't brighten the world. It dignifies it. After everything that's been taken, the survivors stand in color because they endured. And in that quiet act, walking, remembering, placing stones, the setting transforms one last time. From a film location to sacred ground. From history to legacy. What makes the settings and cinematic elements so unforgettable is not just their precision, but their restraint. The film never uses beauty for its own sake. When it offers grandeur, it is to heighten the horror. When it offers intimacy, it is to bring us closer to humanity. There is no escape through fantasy. The world it shows us is brutal, yes, but also filled with moments of resilience, kindness, and impossible grace. Casting souls, not just roles, was a deliberate choice. The lead actor was selected not for star power, but for the depth and potential to portray a man who transformed from opportunist to savior. He prepared meticulously, studying tapes of the real person, listening to survivor testimonies, even visiting sites of the Holocaust to understand the gravity of his role. His aim wasn't to romanticize, but to convey the complex humanity behind the historical figure. His counterpart, the embodiment of cruelty, took on his role with chilling dedication. He altered his physical appearance to inhabit the part fully and immersed himself in original footage and testimonies to capture the mannerisms of a man who personified evil. Even after filming, he admitted the role haunted him, a shadow that lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. The actor portraying the quiet, intellectual Jewish accountant brought his own profound sensitivity to the role. He spent hours conversing with survivors and contemplated the moral weight of his character's role as the keeper of life-saving records. The emotional toll was immense. Portraying everyday people caught in genocide demanded a vulnerability that transcended acting techniques. One of the film's producers was a survivor himself, grounding the cast in reality. He offered silent reminders of the real horrors faced, sometimes by showing the tattoo on his arm when cast members complained about the cold or harsh conditions. This humility and reminder of real suffering kept the production anchored in its moral purpose. During filming, the line between acting and witnessing history blurred. Survivors worked as extras and consultants, and many scenes were shot in actual locations tied to the Holocaust. The emotional atmosphere on set was heavy. For some, the experience reopened wounds they had long tried to close. In one striking incident, an actor dressed in a Nazi uniform was recognized by a survivor in a local bar, sparking an intense emotional encounter. Proof that the film was not just fiction, but a raw reflection of lived trauma. The cast endured long, exhausting days, often emotionally drained by the scenes they had to perform. One actor described the fatigue as absolute, noting the difficulty of balancing acting with the reality of the story being told. To keep morale afloat, the director's friend would call on set to deliver stand-up comedy, providing brief, necessary relief from the darkness. On a particularly intense day filming a scene inside a makeshift camp, one actress collapsed, overwhelmed by the haunting reality they were recreating. After such harrowing workdays, the cast sought refuge in an old Krakow hotel lobby, where laughter and camaraderie offered a temporary escape from the film's relentless gravity. When the movie premiered, the audience reactions were deeply moving. Viewers sat in stunned silence, fully absorbed in a story that felt both historic and heartbreakingly personal. Many praised the film's artistic merit and its courageous choice to confront one of history's darkest chapters with unflinching honesty. Critics widely acclaimed the film, recognizing it as a landmark in historical drama and moral storytelling. While some questioned its focus on one man's redemption amidst mass suffering, most agreed that it raised global awareness of the Holocaust to unprecedented levels, becoming a touchstone for remembrance and education. The lead actor, reflecting on his work, described his most challenging scene, a breakdown filled with regret, as emotionally crushing. He felt the weight of each life on screen, beyond the arc of his character alone. The actor playing the accountant spoke about shedding all acting tricks to portray a man whose strength was quiet endurance. He highlighted moments where the absence of joy on screen spoke louder than any dramatic gesture, allowing grief to breathe through subtle expressions. Survivors themselves praised the film for giving them a voice. One survivor, who was a child laborer in the factory, said the film helped transform silent memory into shared history. Others called the lead character's actions a form of divine intervention, underscoring the profound impact of the story beyond cinema. The deep involvement of the cast with survivors' stories lent authenticity that resonated with audiences worldwide. The portrayal of moral awakening, cruelty, and quiet resistance wasn't just acting. It was a conduit for historical truth. When survivors placed stones on the film's closing scene, it symbolized a final bridge between memory and witness, bringing the story full circle. To sum up, this exploration began with the casting choices that prioritized authenticity and continued through the emotional and psychological demands faced by the actors. We saw how these efforts translated into powerful audience reactions and a film that is both an artistic achievement and a solemn memorial. If this journey through casting, interviews, and audience response moved you, I invite you to subscribe for more deep dives into films that not only tell stories but carry the weight of history and humanity. Like, share, and join a community that honors cinema as a window into our collective memory. Thank you for sharing this experience and bearing witness with me.